Welcome to Spill the Milk. I am so happy to bring you this episode called Pumping Isn't the First Step, Breastfeeding Is. But before we go any further, I need to be very clear about who this episode is for and who it's not for. But really, I think it's for everybody. This episode is definitely for pregnant moms who are already stressed out about pumping and returning to work, and you haven't even had your baby. The ones that are worrying about supply, schedules, output, and how they're going to make everything work. If you already know that you want to be an exclusive pumper from day one, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. That is a valid, intentional feeding choice. And this episode is not here to talk you out of it, but I would encourage you to listen. But if you're planning to breastfeed and you know pumping will eventually be part of your life, this episode is for you. And let's get one thing straight for now. Not everybody needs to pump. Pumping is a tool, not a requirement. There is so much pressure on pregnant moms to prepare for pumping, especially working moms. Pumps, flanges, schedules, freezer stashes, and all of that focus often comes before anyone explains how breastfeeding actually works. That's where things start to unravel. So let's start with this one. Pumping is a tool, not a requirement. Some parents never need to pump. Did you know that? They don't. Some use it occasionally, and some rely heavily on it. But pumping has somehow become framed as mandatory. And I promise you, it is not mandatory for everyone. If you're home full-time and feeding directly at the breast, you may never need to pump. If you're returning to work, pumping becomes a bridge, not the foundation. The problem is when we build the whole feeding plan around the bridge instead of the foundation, that's where the problems come in. Why pumping anxiety starts in pregnancy? Oh my gosh, you guys know this. Most pumping anxiety doesn't come from pumping itself. It comes from fear of the unknown, right? No one explains how milk supply is established. So I'm going to explain it right now. Did you know that you do not have to do any pumping in order for your milk to come in? You don't. That's not how it works. We automatically get a supply. We don't have to do anything. Our body, because the shedding of the placenta signals milk production, we automatically just get a supply. We don't have to do anything. Ask your formula feeding friends. They'll tell you they got milk and they never put their baby there. So when you're in the hospital and they're like, oh my gosh, you have to pump to bring your milk, that's not true. Moms who formula feed, who never put a baby to breast and never remove any milk, get milk. Pumping is not necessary in the hospital. What normal feeds look like? No one really explains this either. And in those first couple of days, it's a lot of sleeping and not a lot of eating. And it's very scary for new moms. Babies, breast milk fed babies especially, need very small quantities very frequently. How much milk your baby actually takes in varies as well on a day-to-day basis. In those first few days of life, your baby needs 5 to 15 mils per feeding. That's not even an ounce. 15 mils is a half an ounce. Day one is 5 mils. That's just a little teaspoon. And your output is going to vary day to day. That's because that's how it works. By using a pump to dictate output, there's so many variables involved there. But your baby also takes different amounts every day. Some moms try to control that so they can focus on the pump. They try to control and know, and they want to see the amount that's coming out, and they start to focus on the pump. I want to redirect you. So please keep listening. Breastfeeding sets the body up for pumping. Your body learns how much milk to make based on early milk removal. Breastfeeding, especially in the early weeks, is the most efficient teacher of milk supply. Your baby and your body are designed to work together. They will set you up for that success. When breastfeeding is going well, supply is more stable. Breasts respond better to pumps. Letdowns are easier, and you can see those in your baby. They start out in that little quiver suckle, and then all of a sudden they get a letdown, and that oxytocin releases and causes the ducts and the lobules to contract down and spurt out that milk for you. But pumping output will improve the more that you do it. When breastfeeding is misunderstood or struggling, pumping feels like a constant fight. So here's where it's important, because what I said was this episode is really for those of you who are pregnant and you're worried. You're very, very worried. Why breastfeeding education belongs in pregnancy? Well, it's because of some of the things I already listed. See, I really feel like what happens is we focus so much on the aspect of educating a mom about labor and delivery that we don't educate ourselves on how we're going to feed our baby and what that looks like for us. And the moment that baby is born, that labor and delivery class and everything that you learned is done the moment that that baby is born. But that breastfeeding journey you're getting ready to go on doesn't stop after a few hours of pushing. It continues on and on and on. And you need to be supported in that so that you understand. So, breastfeeding education needs to happen before the baby arrives. I say this all the time, and I hear it from thousands upon thousands of moms when I'm doing virtual consultations with them. The most common thing I hear is, I wish I would have known more. So, my breastfeeding class during pregnancy focuses on all those things that you need to know. And I'm going to recommend that you take it. I'm going to link it in the description. It's called the Breast Start. It talks to you about expectations with your baby, how supply works, what early feeding should look like, supply and demand, feeding on demand, what's normal and what's a red flag. And it's going to set realistic expectations for you. This isn't about pressure. It's about preparation. Pumping education comes when pumping is relevant. First, we want to establish breastfeeding because without establishing good breastfeeding, we could cause a problem with pumping. Once feeding is established and your goals are clear, then pumping education sure does make sense, sweetie. It definitely does. That's why my pumping class is designed to be taken after birth. Now, here's the caveat to my pumping class. It's called responsive pumping, but here's what I need you to know. If you do plan on being an exclusive pumper, that class is going to take you on that journey as well. Because pumping depends on your baby's age, your work schedule, how often your baby feeds, your body's response, your goals, your flanges, how to store your milk, how to pace a bottle feed. All of that is included in my responsive pumping class. I'll link it in the description as well. Teaching pumping too early without context creates anxiety instead of confidence. And my job is to build confidence in you. The order that works, well, I just gave it to you. For moms who will be pumping because they're returning to work, here's the order that works best and what I've seen over my 20 years. Breastfeeding education during pregnancy, knowing what to expect. The expectation of what your baby can do on day one is very different than what your baby can do 2 weeks out. During this time, we need to understand that breastfeeding in itself takes time. It's a journey you're going on with your baby. Just like Rome wasn't built in a day, neither is a breastfeeding journey. Those first few weeks are rough, but they get better. And the more you practice it, the better you become. Here's my biggest thing that I want to warn you against. If you're practicing 3 things, you're not going to be really good at any of them. If you're practicing baby to breast, pumping, and bottle feeding, no one has a chance to get a real good grip on anything. And if we go back to the primary thing that's important in establishing a good milk supply, it's your baby. Get good at that before you try to get good at anything else. Establish feeding and milk supply. That's step 2. And then step 3, pumping education once pumping is needed, a couple weeks before you decide. Again, all of my resources are going to be linked in this description. I'm going to encourage you to really, truly think about what I said with breastfeeding education during pregnancy. This order that I just gave, breastfeeding education during pregnancy, establishing feeding and milk supply, and then pumping education, reduces stress, improves supply, and makes pumping feel manageable instead of overwhelming. So if you're pregnant and already worried about pumping, take a deep breath, sweet mama. I've got you. You don't need to do everything at once. You don't need to master pumping before your baby is even here. And you definitely don't need to pump unless there's a reason to. Start with breastfeeding education. Get solid in your knowledge and get in a good format with your baby. Then add pumping when it actually applies to your life. So I'm calling out all of you pregnant moms. Start with my breastfeeding class, the Breast Start. It lays the groundwork. Then, when pumping becomes part of your plan, my responsive pumping class will meet you right where you are. Again, all the links are going to be in the notes, and I can't wait to hear how some of you are progressing. Have a good day.